July meeting of the Human Rights Commission. I'm Kyle Bessie, I'm chair of the commission, and I'm just going to have everybody introduce themselves, including you all who have joined us today. Okay, so our first item on the agenda is public comment. We have been informed that Maxine, is it Fuchsen?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
And Curtis Bell have a resolution that they're presenting to Multnomah County that they'd like us to endorse, and they want to present that to us today for our endorsement at the next meeting, I believe.
Should we go up there to the?
Please. Sure. Thank you.
It's in your packet too.
Oh, thank you very much, Jim. And this, I believe, was emailed out to everybody earlier this week.
I have other copies, also that includes the organizations and leaders that have already sponsored this, endorsed this resolution. Copies here and there. I also have copies of the city resolution that was passed in January 2012, which is different from Multnomah County, and is really focused on the Afghanistan war, but it has the same intent of the effort from below to get our government to change its priorities away from war and military spending toward the human needs that all of you are engaged with. So I have that here if anyone would like copies of that city petition, and also this had so I'll Maxine will describe the resolution and give some background to it, and then I'll be around. She'll have to leave a little bit early, but I'll be around for the whole meeting if you have any questions about it or comments to make. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to share this issue with you, because this really is about what you're about, the changing of our priorities towards human needs and the solution of human problems up here. And, so that's what Maxine will be presenting the resolution.
And now that you're on camera, if both of you would just go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Okay. My name is Curtis Bell. I'm with the Peace Action Group of First Unitarian Church, and we and a number of others are working on this resolution. The organizations are listed on the page there.
And I'm Maxine Fuchsen, and live in Portland, and I'll tell you more about myself in my little presentation here, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, should I go ahead?
Absolutely.
Okay, so well, thank you, first of all, to all of you commissioners and the community members who are here with us this evening to listen. So Kurt Bell, my colleague, and I are here to ask for the Human Rights Commission endorsement of a resolution that's being brought before the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners, calling for us to redirect our national priorities from the huge amount of spending on the military and war to instead spending to address the human needs in our community. The resolution was written and has been endorsed by individuals from many walks of life, including clergy and veterans, a number of representatives from various churches and local peace and justice groups. I'm going to start, and then Kurt may make some final comments, and also, as he said, he's here for questions at the end of the meeting and further discussion. So just a little bit about me. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. I'm also a member of Physicians for Social Responsibility and Jewish Voice for Peace. Both are organizations that have endorsed this amendment. So for many years, I've provided health care in the community with care through Multnomah County Health Department clinics. And now I'm working on health issues of very young children and how we help children and families be healthy so that children can enter school with every possible measure for success. So the City of Portland, the City Council passed a resolution, as Kurt mentioned, in January 2012 that's similar, not exact, but similar to the one, totally similar in intent, that we're bringing before the Multnomah County Commissioners. And both these resolutions, although they're symbolic, serve as a message to our legislators, both at the state and the federal level, that Portland, like all communities across the country, is hurting for funding of basic human services, and that we want these services to be prioritized over the hemorrhaging of money for war. So this resolution is part of a nationwide citizens movement where many localities across the country are speaking up and asking that, in fact, we re-examine our national priorities to be more in line with the needs of our communities. Because we know that vital and healthy communities are really the key to national security. So, as we said, we're asking the Multnomah County officials to go on record by passing this resolution. Because though our governments aren't responsible for allocating war funding and military funding officially, we do in fact pay for it. And I think that fact is brought home by figures published by a group called the National Priorities Project and others. But the National Priorities Project is a pretty amazing group in that they pull their data from US government figures to calculate how much any given community has paid into our US military budget in many different manners. And you can see all of their material. They have a website, National Priorities Project. One example of the data published by the National Priorities Project, since 2001, the taxpayers in Portland alone have paid $2.73 billion for the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So how does this tie into the work of the Human Rights Commission? Well, the work of the Human Rights Commission is to eliminate discrimination and bigotry and to work for justice following the guidelines of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. My work, the work of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I believe your work have many, many points of intersection. So in order for all of us to do our work as we should, we really have to reallocate our national spending away from war and into the services that all our children and our communities need. I think it's not unfair to say there's an elephant in the room. So from the Human Rights Commission strategic plan on page 19, a quote, "Portland will be prosperous only as it identifies, prioritizes, and addresses the root causes of inequity, many of which are grounded in human rights lapses and violations," unquote. And then section 1, article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, "Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services." So we could talk about any of those list of human rights, but we don't have time. So I just wanted to focus for a minute on one of them and talk about food as a basic human right. So some food statistics. In an article in the Oregonian in November of 2011, David Sarason wrote about the high cost of food insecurity among children in Oregon. According to statistics that he quoted from the USDA, 29% of Oregon's children are suffering from food insecurity. The District of Columbia and our state, Oregon, have the highest rates of childhood hunger in the nation. Sarason writes about the numerous studies showing the adverse effects of child hunger on overall health, academic achievement, psychological well-being, goes on and on. In fact, hunger and food insecurity have lifelong consequences. Economically, hunger has also hurt our state. According to a 2011 report called Hunger in America, published by the Center for American Progress, hunger in Oregon has cost us $2.1 billion in 2010 alone. We pay those costs through lowered academic and economic productivity, more hunger-related diseases, and a greater reliance on human services and emergency food programs. So just to make it personal, about 3 weeks or so ago, at the school-based clinic where I worked, as school was getting ready to be out for summer vacation and we were all looking forward to summer weather, I was seeing one of my patients, a lovely, energetic 4-year-old. I've known her family for many, many years, and that her family's her parents and her 2 older brothers. They're a hard-working family and they're very low income. So as my 4-year-old patient was obliviously sitting in the exam room drawing summertime pictures of flowers and her family on the exam table paper, her mom worriedly told me, and I've heard this from many, many families, that she worries so much about summer and her family food budget. Her children rely heavily on school free breakfast and lunch just to make their daily meals. She talked about how the summer meal programs that she relies on have been drastically cut. She'll be relying on food pantries and other free food sites to just barely make ends meet, she told me. And still, there are times when there just isn't anything in the house for the kids to eat. I have hungry, growing kids, she said. That's not what summer vacation for a 4, a 7, or a 10-year-old or their parents should look like in my mind. And that's why I think that this resolution is so important. It's really looking at how we have we've allocated funds in such an immoral way. So for that family and for so many others, our war budget really is a violation of their human rights. We need to go on record and change these priorities to tell our legislators in DC that we want a budget that respects and supports human rights, not one that diminishes our national capacity and does really nothing for any added security. Spending money on war is not just bad policy, it is immoral from a human rights perspective.
Thank you, Maxine. I think Maxine will have to leave a little early, as I say, but I'll be around to answer questions. I would just like to add a couple more numbers. That the City Council has been disturbed by the deficit of, I think, $21 million. That's spent by the Department of Defense in about 16 minutes. Multnomah County has spent about $2 billion. The taxes from Multnomah County just in 1 year alone are about $2 billion. That totally dwarfs the small cut in the $21 million in the city budget. $8 million has been cut from the federal housing program. That represents all those renters that will try to be homeless. So it's totally out of proportion, the amount of money that we provide for our community versus money for wars that really make us less safe, I would say, than we would otherwise be. So the spending for war and defense seems to us totally out of proportion, and this has led to a grassroots effort around the country, of counties around the country, of cities around the country, and some state legislatures, labor organizations calling for this change in national priorities. And so we'd like to ask the Human Rights Commission to be a part of that grassroots effort.
So I guess to be clear, what we're seeking is an endorsement of the resolution that will go before the county.
And you mentioned before the meeting that you didn't think that this would be going before the county commissioners before our next meeting in August.
Right, there's a draft before them now, just so you know the process, and we're working with them to get, the wording exactly as they're comfortable with, and so it's kind of been a back and forth process.
Actually, the commissioner who has been was initially opposed to this resolution, Commissioner McKeel, who has a son who has been in Iraq 4 times or 5 times and very involved in veterans issues. She thought original drafts were not sensitive enough to the needs of veterans, so the resolution has been changed to make it more sensitive to the needs of veterans. And she has, at least at our last meeting, come on board with support for this resolution, so we expect it to be supported by the county commission. And anyway, because it's not only veterans too, their veterans services are being cut by the sequestering and other cuts in federal spending.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just have a specific question about 1B in the resolve section. I'm aware, well, before that, I really appreciate all the specific data that you guys are bringing to this. It's very helpful. But for 1B, I appreciate that one too. And I'm wondering if this would include security contractor operations overseas as well. Could be that military word does cover it, but I'm curious whether or not you feel that would, because I'm aware that there's security over there too. Just something to.
Yeah, as you may know, in Afghanistan, the number of contractors is almost equal to the number of combat soldiers, and this is an enormous cost. So the specifics are not, this wouldn't affect, for example, probably the security contractors at embassies around the country, for example. It's not a blanket thing for all, but it's and the statement is to reduce, not to eliminate. So where security personnel was essential in an embassy, for example, that certainly wouldn't be part of it. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, yeah.
It was a bit different than the essential, because I'm aware that there's a line that bleeds between military.
Pardon?
There's a bleeding line between military and service personnel in war zones. So we don't probably need to get fully into it. I can talk to you about it later. I was just curious if that had been discussed in your.
I can't say that we discussed it to that point of.
Specificity,
Yeah.
yeah. This is more to change the orientation than any specific recommendation. Yeah.
So y'all got something to say, and then we're going to have to move on, but as Curtis said,
I'll be
he's going to be here
at the
afterward.
end, and I'll be here afterwards for any questions.
Also, it sounds like there will be a final draft of the resolution that we'll hear.
I would imagine within the next month, before your next meeting, there will be a final draft.
So we'll get a copy of
And
that.
we'll send it to you. Yeah.
So go ahead, Diallo, and then we're going to.
My question is similar to Amy's. What's the difference between the military spending and foreign aid? Is foreign aid the same thing?
I think different, so military spending specifically is weaponry,
Right.
Combat troops. So it's not foreign aid in the sense of food or rebuilding supplies or things like that. The other thing that I think is really important is that there's no suggestion at all to curtail veterans' benefits. In fact, one of the groups so hard hit by these wars, I mean, the data of returning veterans is so dismal in terms of mental health issues and housing, education, all that stuff. So we have been really clear and appreciate Commissioner McKeel's sensitivity to that, to add that there's no intention at all. So I would say foreign aid veterans, no intention to cut that.
Can I make one last comment?
Sure.
Really quick. So there was a video sent by the Egypt situation, the Egypt rising situation, and what they asked for Obama and for America was to, well, basically their message was leave them alone, stop spending money on war. And so this is answering that call. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, this is really specifically a large part of our foreign aid, as you may know. Perhaps I think the majority of our foreign aid is actually military in nature. That we give Egypt like $1.2 billion a year, which they in turn buy U.S. military equipment. I think that is not a direct spending of the Department of Defense, but of course it's all part of the same package, and it certainly wouldn't affect foreign aid that is not military.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
all
for
so much.
your interest.